This podcast is intended for mature audiences. Some listeners may find the content distressing, as episodes may include discussions of violence, human trafficking, and other forms of abuse, including emotional, psychological, sexual, financial, and physical. In many cases, names have been changed to protect those involved. Please note that the statements and opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect my own. Hi, warriors. Welcome to 1 in 3. I'm your host, Ingrid. I'm hopping into your feed today with a big announcement. But before I share it, I want to reassure you your regular Wednesday episodes are not going anywhere. The conversations, the stories, and the mission behind this podcast are staying exactly where they've always been. When I launched this podcast in 2023, I called it 1 in 3 for a reason. At the time, the statistics surrounding domestic violence were, and still are, staggering. The Centers for Disease Control previously reported that 1 in 3 men in the United States would experience physical violence, sexual violence, or stalking by an intimate partner during their lifetime. Globally, the World Health Organization estimated that about 1 in 3 women would experience physical or sexual violence, most often at the hands of someone they know. Those numbers mattered. They mattered because they helped people understand the scope of a problem that is often hidden behind closed doors. They helped survivors recognize that they were not alone. And that was the purpose of 1 in 3. But statistics change. As more research is conducted and more survivors come forward, we continue learning that domestic violence and other forms of abuse are not only more widespread than many people realized, but also more complex. The way abuse happens, the ways survivors experience it, and the barriers they face afterward have become much clearer. While it is encouraging that more survivors are being recognized, it's also heartbreaking because it reminds us that the problem is not getting smaller. And that made me ask an important question. If this podcast is built around statistics, what happens when those statistics change? The answer became very clear. This podcast was never really about a number. It was always about the people behind it. Now, don't get me wrong, statistics still matter. They give us context. They show us that abuse is not rare. It is not isolated. It's not something that happens to someone else. But statistics can only tell us so much. They can show us the scope of the problem, but they can't tell us what it felt like to live through abuse. They can't tell us what it took to leave, what healing looks like, or the courage it takes for survivors to speak their truth. That's where stories come in. Since launching this podcast, I've had the privilege of speaking with survivors who trusted me with some of the most painful, vulnerable moments of their lives. I've had conversations with experts, advocates, professionals, and researchers who have helped us understand abuse from so many different perspectives. Together, we have talked about coercive control, family court, legal abuse, traumatic brain injuries, faith, healing, childhood trauma, sexual assault, human trafficking, and so much more. And I want to talk about those last 2 topics for a moment because they are an important part of where this podcast is headed. Domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking are not always separate experiences. In many cases, they overlap. Survivors may experience more than one form of violence at the same time, and often the tactics used by offenders look remarkably similar. Grooming, manipulation, isolation, intimidation, threats, and gaining control over another person's life. Understanding those connections matters, because when we understand the patterns, we become better equipped to recognize abuse, support survivors, and create meaningful change. Every conversation I've had has reminded me of the same thing. Behind every statistic is a person with a story, a person who deserves to be heard, a person whose life matters. And those stories are where healing begins. They are where education happens. They are where systems are challenged, and they are where change starts. As I reflected on where this podcast is today and where I hope to take it in the future, I realized something important. The podcast hasn't changed direction. It's evolved. What started as a podcast centered around domestic violence statistics has grown into a place where survivor voices are amplified, difficult conversations happen, and advocacy continues to expand. Every episode has added another layer to our understanding of abuse. Every guest has reminded us that behind every statistic is a human being. And because of that, I knew it was time for the name to grow too. So today, I'm excited to share that 1 in 3 will begin transitioning to its new name, Beyond the Statistics. I love this title because it honors where we started while making room for where we're going. I will never stop talking about the numbers because they matter. Awareness starts with understanding the scope of the problem. But numbers alone can't tell the whole story. They don't tell us what it felt like to stay. They don't tell us what it took to survive. They don't tell us what it took to leave. They don't tell us about the journey of rebuilding a life afterward. They don't tell us how systems sometimes fail survivors or how survivors continue fighting for change anyway. Those are the stories we are telling here. And that is what Beyond the Statistics represents. You will continue hearing honest conversations with survivors, experts, advocates, attorneys, therapists, healthcare professionals, and researchers. We will continue talking about domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, coercive control, healing, prevention, and the systems that impact survivors every single day. If anything, this new name gives us more room to continue growing while staying true to the heart of why this podcast exists. Over the next week, you will notice some changes. The cover art will be updated. The podcast description will evolve. The website and social media will gradually transition to reflect the new name. But your Wednesday episodes will continue exactly as they always have. Nothing about where or how you listen will change. This is simply the beginning of a new chapter, and I wanted you, my listeners, to hear it from me first. I also wanted to say thank you. Thank you to every survivor who has trusted me with their story. Thank you to every expert who has shared their knowledge. Thank you to every advocate working to make systems safer and more responsive. And thank you to every one of you who has listened, shared an episode, left a review, sent a message, or quietly found comfort in knowing that someone else understood. You have helped shape this podcast into something I never imagined when I hit publish on that very first episode. This next chapter belongs to all of us. I'm so excited for what's ahead, and I cannot wait to continue this journey with you as we move beyond the statistics together. Thank you for listening. Stay strong, and wherever you are in your journey, always remember, you are not alone. Oh, and welcome to Beyond the Statistics, because awareness starts with numbers, but understanding begins with stories, and stories are where change begins.